Hello, and welcome to the Indy Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Amy Peele. Hey, Amy, how are you doing?
Hi, Manny. Nice to be here.
I'm very pleased to have you here. To give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, Amy S. Peele, RN, is the award-winning author of Cut, Match, and Hold, Medical Mysteries with a Mission and a Side of Humor. And she's received the NYC Big Book Award, the Chanticleer International Book Award, the IPPY, Independent Press Award, and more. Before becoming a writer, Amy spent 35 years in the organ transplant field, which provides an authentic backdrop to her books. Amy loves to speak, swim, teach chair yoga, meditate, and kill the people she doesn't like from work in her mysteries and use their organs because why waste the kill? And so anytime I talk to a fellow author who has an area of specialty like this, I always like to start out by asking, what did you see either in your own author life or the author life of other people that led you to feel like emphasizing self-care was important?
Well, I think probably like you and most people who are listening to the podcast or watching it is that you sit in a chair long enough when you're doing anything, any work, and we all probably do different types of work in addition to our writing world. Your body just kind of gets sedentary and a little pain in the neck, then it's the shoulders. So truthfully, my last big girl job, it was so intense because I worked at UCSF. We had to do about 600 solid organ transplants a year, that what I didn't know was happening is that I was pulling my shoulders up like fight or flight. And so after about 2 months, my neck started to hurt. And I went to a physical therapist, of course, and she goes, "Oh, you got to get the shoulders down. You don't need them. They're not earrings. They're like you need that space on the side of your neck, right?"
Yeah.
So part of it, and then part of it is just because my brain was so into my work and then my writing that I just forgot about my body. And, you can't really do that. I did try many times. So I've tried an experiment. It has failed. But I then had to just put together some tips and tricks for my own self that would be helpful so I could move around. And I know you've had some great guests before me who have some wonderful tips as well. And I had to figure out how to get myself to do it and decide what it was I felt like I could do when I'm in the middle of a scene, that I'm writing and going. You know what it feels like? It's like, no, I'm not stopping. This is too good. What if I stop and I lose my juice? It's like, yeah, but I found out you actually can come right back to the page for the scene and character and get what you need.
What you're saying about the shoulders speaks so much to me because I think everybody has kind of the place where they hold their tension. And for me, it's everything. It's from my lower face to my shoulders. And now for about 3 years, I've been having a terrible time with my mouth, of all things. Inconvenient if you're a podcaster. It's actually fine if I'm talking, but if I stop talking for a while, sitting at my desk writing, I think I tighten up the muscles in my mouth. And initially, it was like pushing against my teeth. And I never had braces. This is probably way more information than anyone wants to know about my health. But I never had braces, but it felt, I imagine it must feel when you get your braces tightened to have that pressure on your teeth over a long period of time. And I've been to every medical professional that is out there and everyone's like, "Oh, that's really interesting. I have no idea what's happening there." And, but it's starting to spread. Now it's sort of my mouth, my jaw, and my shoulders. So yeah, I totally get what you mean.
That's tense. One of the little tips you might want to think about, and again, it takes a little practice, and sometimes you have to put little Post-its on the side of your screen to remind yourself until it becomes just second nature, is you can take your tongue and you can put it at the top between your two front teeth and your mouth. And when you do that, you can't clench. Your TMJ joint here, you can't, if you have your tongue, just try your tongue at the top of your mouth behind your two front teeth, like that, and try to clench you can't do it. Your tongue won't allow it. And so, even it's a simple little thing, but because all these muscles in our neck are so strong, and it's their job to hold our head up. But that TMJ thing, or no one's watching you when you're right. So if you put a little close tip of the tongue to the roof and go back and forth, like one of those Disney characters who have a rubber mouth, like Elmer Fudd, you can go like that. It just loosens it up, as opposed to our head and for some reason we think that if we do this intense gripping, that it's going to make our story better or characters. But when you then go about your day and your neck is sore, you can do some neck rolls too. Simple things, but you have to begin by you aware that you do it, be patient with yourself, not judgmental. And then put the stick Post-its like on the side of it and just say tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. Or how about just some easy neck, real simple, slow types of movements where you just gently, with one hand, you'd have to stop writing for a minute. That's okay. Or even if you don't want to stop writing, you could just do this, shoulder blades back and down, belly button back bone. And then you
And
can
just describe
breathe.
for the people who are only listening, describe a little bit what you're doing with your head.
So what I'm doing with my head is I'm just gently bringing my left ear towards my left shoulder, not a lot. This is no go big, go home. Just gentle. It's a neck, little gentle. If it feels good, if it doesn't feel good, always never do it. But you're gently just putting your head to one side and then coming back to center and then putting back to the other side. And it's a simple thing, but it stretches the sides of the muscle on the neck. And it really is just another way of give a little up to your neck as opposed to what it has to do all day long, which is keep your head straight and stationary. Let's hope. But, just little tips and tricks I've learned from my coaches in the past. Glimmers and whispers. It's not, if I don't do all this right now. No, be kind to yourself. Today, maybe I'll just try to remember 3 times to put my, tip of my tongue behind my 2 front teeth. Maybe that's good for me today. But those, just integrating those things into your practice, whatever that is in terms of writing or desk time. I think that's really important.
It does highlight sort of 2 different reminders that people have to give themselves. One is once an hour, when I hit the 55-minute mark, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk around the house for 5 minutes or whatever it is for you. So that is the kind of thing where setting a timer is easy. Maybe getting up when the timer goes off isn't as easy, but it's a mechanical thing. Whereas that's different than the scenario where you have to be reminding yourself to do something ideally all the time, putting the tongue to the back of your teeth or sitting up straight or not hunching forward or whatever those things are. Do you have different advice for those 2 different types of scenarios?
I do. Well, one of the things is I have, believe it or not, a very good old-fashioned egg timer. For people who are just listening, you can get a cheap egg timer anywhere. So you don't even have to depend on electronics. And you set it nice loud. So I'm not going to set it because it'll be going off for 20 minutes. And I know you hear it, put it on your phone, da, 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 da. But the egg timer kind of announces itself like in a demanding way. It goes off and sometimes I look at it and go, well, I think, what if I just stood up? What if I just stood up and sat back down? Nothing else. And again, it was baby steps, right? So that, okay, I can do that. So, it's very basic, but I have to say, because in our writing world, all of us writers, what we love to do once we get in our flow is we like to keep writing. What our body's telling us in gentle whispers is, could you just move? Could you just do this? Or again, if you, like I always do, reminder Post-its until it becomes habit. I'll just, maybe you can do a little twist and just look over to your right shoulder for a second. You don't even, if you can't stand up, I get it. Or you just turn over to your left shoulder in your chair and just let your chair stretch your spine a little bit, because our spine is so important. But if we don't give it a turn to the left or the right, get those muscles limber and flexible, it stiffens up. And when your spine is stiff, it doesn't feel good. So I don't know if I addressed both of the issues you discussed, but I think really being gentle with yourself, a simple egg timer, something like, if I get up, there's this really great study at Johns Hopkins called pleasure bundling. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's gotten me through all kinds of things, including when I was like, oh, I don't know if I can write this chapter, or what am I going to do with this character? So you give yourself a gift. So like I say, if I'm going to stand up for 20 minutes, then I get to have, could be a cold drink. It could be a treat. It could be a walk downstairs and just outside for a minute, whatever's a treat for you. But when you're establishing a new habit that you're not wild about or you don't want to do, if you pleasure bundle it with something that does bring you joy, whether it's a hearty laugh or just a stretch or whatever, the more you do that, it changes the neural pathways in your brain. So therefore, then when you do start doing it on a regular basis, it's actually something that you want to do. It's not something that you have to do. You get to do. So it's slowly pre-programming your brain that, boy, did I feel better yesterday after I wrote, I did XYZ. And again, not a ton of stuff, because sometimes our brain goes, oh, if I have to do all that, then why bother? I'm just going to sit. So it's kind of bargaining with your own system, your own brain, your own habitual process of what habits do you already have and how did you get to those habits? Notice that. So the pleasuring bundling thing is extremely important. And the outcome of the study at Johns Hopkins was that at that point, people started, oh, I don't want to do my weightlifting, or I don't want to go for a walk, or whatever it is. Your brain, once you've reformatted and the neurotransmitters working, you actually looked forward to doing it. You even forgot that it wasn't part because you've established new neural pathways that now are like, oh yeah, I got to set the egg timer, or I'm going to stand up or shimmy in my chair, or whatever brings you joy. A song you want to sing at the top of your lungs, as long as, the neighbors aren't listening and your husband's not across the hall on a Zoom call, something like that.
Well, it is surprising how often it's not just talking oneself into doing the things that maybe initially aren't that pleasant, but it's even talking oneself into doing the things that are initially are pleasant. I'm going to feel like sound like a very sick person, but I also have arthritis in my hips. And so there are exercises that have been recommended to me to do to keep my hips loose. And they're very pleasant to do. It's not that they're unpleasant to do. And I always feel better, but so often, and it's actually on my daily checklist. Like I have a list of things that I do every day, which include being on my elliptical for 20 minutes or checking my BookBub ads or things like that. One of them is doing the leg stretching exercises. And it's shocking how often I get to the end of the day, or I get to the beginning of the following day is more accurate. And I haven't done it, even though when I do it, I enjoy it.
Oh yeah. It's so funny. It's like, you really have to I do talk to myself. Like in the morning, I always meditate, and then I do a little work on the floor, a little yoga, not a lot, not dramatic things. I can even stay in my pajamas if I want before I get up. But when I do that sequence, I always feel better. But there's days where I have time. Even today, when I was preparing for the podcast, I got ready early. So I had 15 minutes and then get time to get on camera. And I just did 15 minutes of yoga on the floor. And I knew it would bring good energy for me. And I love doing it. And it's like the hip things probably are like some wonderful windshield wipers and hips moving or whatever they are. And they feel great. But yeah, and the one thing that I've learned as an accountability partner, and I do this both for my well-being practice as well as my writing. So I have a gal that I know, and we text each other. I meditated 3 times a day, did yoga and swam, and she'll text me what she did. So it's almost accountability. There's someone in your life that wouldn't mind that you would actually remind them of whatever they decided to do for that commitment. And then you are like accountable. Oh, I better text Amy. I wanted to make sure she knows I did my hip exercises today. And it's kind of like having somebody witness that. I do that with power hours, writing and stuff, where there's a couple of women that I'm in writing group with, just open the Zoom. Hi, I'm working on this for an hour and a half. Turn the camera, turn the sound off. At work, we come back on. But it's like, I needed to show up for somebody beside myself. I mean, to do that or to witness it. Not that I wouldn't do it, but it makes it a little bit more fun. I have a meeting with Maddie. I need to be there. I can't disappoint and not show up. So that's just a little bit of a partnership piece that has helped over time.
I think that another thing that stands in the way of writers doing exactly what you're recommending, and you had mentioned this earlier, that we don't want to step away from the work we're doing for the fear that we're going to lose our train of thought. Is there anything in your experience that you find helps maintain that train of thought through doing some of these things that we need to do to maintain physical well-being?
Well, what you can do is you're writing, let's say you're going to town, it's going well, but buzzer goes off or whatever you use. Put the caps on, put like a bunch of X's or just put start here. You're doing great. Don't forget to say Maddie's blue shirt was pretty. Just like a little reminder. So then if you stand up and you go in the other room where you give yourself that little break, you come right back and you realize exactly where you were and you've left yourself a little breadcrumb. And then you can just delete that and continue on your story. So leaving yourself like passing the baton, but you've written it on the screen. And so you know exactly what you were thinking. And you have to properly write it, but then get up and move and then come back. So there's no like change of your brain going, yeah, I knew that scene I was writing was going really well. So that's one little tip and trick, to just trust that juice will still be there once you get up and move around, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that this is sort of a different stage of the writing process, but as I've said in previous podcast episodes, there's a period of time in writing a book that my house is cleaner than it is at any other time because I'm one of those people who writes in my head. And so I never sit and just stare at a screen. Now, sometimes that's a good thing. I'll talk about that a little bit. Sometimes it's a bad thing because sometimes I'm doing it because I'm just feeling antsy. And if I just sat there for 120 seconds, I would get past whatever the antsiness was. So sometimes it undermines me. But the good thing is that if I'm at that stage in a book where I'm capturing the story, I'll go do the laundry or whatever. And then while I'm doing the laundry, it's not like I'm not writing. It's just that I'm writing in the laundry room rather than at my desk. And then I'll rush back to my desk, and capture whatever I was thinking about. And then I'll go sweep the kitchen and then go back. So I guess another piece of advice would be, to the extent that it doesn't undermine your productivity, don't think that staring at the screen is going to somehow magically make words come. And in fact, getting away from it, I think, is getting that double benefit of getting a little bit of exercise, getting a little bit of movement, but also maybe getting more words than you would have otherwise. Thoughts about that?
I like that. And you can take your phone and say, I can't, standing up and just put the voice dictation on and go. And I was just standing up and then I was thinking about my character, Angie. She's crazy, but she needs to remember to ask herself these questions. While you're walking, you can talk, your voice. I wrote part of my books that way because I had gotten a knee replacement. And so I wasn't as ambulatory as I, of course, am today. And I would just take my phone and say, chapter 7, scene 3, don't forget to, or here's what's going to happen, like little memos to myself. So then when I came back to sit down at my desk, I saw that I could just take that memo because it's a voice memo, but it also dictates the language, copy, paste it, put it in my manuscript, and then tailor it, clean it up and whatever. But I didn't lose the thought just because I got up and moved around. So all these little tips and tricks. Yeah.
Just a quick break from the interview. Are you getting value from the podcast? Please consider supporting it and all the work I do at the Indy Author by becoming a patron. To pledge a monthly contribution, go to patreon.com/the Indy Author, or to make an occasional contribution, perhaps to indicate the value that a specific episode or resource provided to you on your creative voyage, scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee. And now, back to the interview.
We talked a little bit about from the shoulders up and hips, but obviously hands is an area that if you're a writer and your hand goes south, then you're in big trouble. And I know that you have some advice about hand care.
Yes, I do. I love this one. If there's hand yoga, yes, there is. So if anyone says you're not doing yoga, you can say, excuse me, I'm doing hand yoga. And for the audio, I have a link at my website, and I know you'll follow up, but really and I teach this to educators and superintendents and anybody who even just uses their hands regularly that aren't writers. But when you think about it, if you just bend your back forward and put your chin down and then pretend like you're holding a steering wheel in your mind's eye and just notice how your body is crunched over a little bit. If you just pulled your tummy and your belly button, backbone, and you sat straight up in your chair and just shrugged your shoulders down and shook your hands out a little bit. But there's a fun little quick exercise, and I won't do the whole thing, but I'll just cue it up, and then you could send videos. You take your little finger on your left hand, and you take your right thumb, and just always support the middle knuckle, back of the finger, and you pull the finger back. And then you go move to your ring finger and your middle finger and your index finger. And then you massage the meat of your thumb because that always gets a little chunky, if you will, and then shake your hand out. And then you can do the other hand pretty quickly. I do this now subconsciously in meetings or when I'm talking to people, don't even notice. And then I just stretch my hands out. And it's just kind of nice to shake them out. It is lotion, and we have synovial fluid in all of our joints, and it wants to move around. It doesn't want to be stationary or down on our phone or in the car all the time. Our hands need to move like every other part of our body. And when you do that, it just gives them a little love. Yeah, they don't get a lot of attention on a good day, right? We just expect them to do everything and then move along our day. So just think of it as another important part of you. And when you give them a little attention, a little stretch, you'd be surprised how it feels good. And you can just get right back to your keyboard. And I hate to say this, but you don't have to stand up to do the hand yoga but it'd help just because your body can move around while you're doing the hand yoga.
Yeah. I think even if it's just a matter of getting up and my house is set up in a way that you can actually walk around the first floor and walk through the kitchen, dining room, front hall, kitchen, dining room, front hall. It's not a very long walk. But if I'm thinking about something, I do try to remind myself to just get up and do that. That doesn't actually count as exercise per se, but it does get me out of the chair. And sometimes it also does lead to a little bit more movement than I would get otherwise.
Yeah.
So if people are, let's say they're in a very, very sedentary place and they're really not getting much movement at all. You've mentioned a couple of examples, but if you were prescribing a little regimen for people to get started with, what would you recommend they start with? And then what are some things that they could add on over time?
I would recommend they pick 3 of their favorite songs that they love to sing, or they like to move to, or they just makes their heart happy. And make sure they're upfront on whatever you have, your phone or your whatever, however you listen to radio. And I would say, set a little timer. For the first time, just be gentle and kind to yourself. Again, it's not go big, go home. It's little baby steps over time. Like we all brush our teeth every day. I would say as kids, it wasn't our favorite thing to do. But as adults, we kind of know that's kind of what you have to do, you get to do. So you can change first the language. I get to listen to a little bit of Lizzo. I like Lizzo. She gets me going. And I might just put a little fun little snippet of Lizzo on my iPhone I use. And it's hard for me not to start moving to some of her songs. And I also like a bunch of oldies and goodies and all that stuff. So I had little things like just music. If you care for just even if it's a symphony or if it's a singer, Bruno Mars, anybody that really just you love to hear, and just see what that does for you. Even if it's you just are sedentary and you're not getting up. Because sometimes we get stubborn with ourselves. Not getting up. I have too much to do. If I get up, I'll see the laundry has to be put in the dryer. And my house is dirty too when I'm writing. My poor husband, the dishes are in the sink. But I would say just use a little musical prompt for yourself. Do something like, even if you just say, okay, I'll stand up today. What's reasonable? I'll stand up 3 times. Might not be for more than a second. Might not be more than, or maybe a couple minutes you might stand up. But just even on your first day of, okay, I'm going to try this and see if this lady knows what she's talking about or not. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to sit down. Maybe I have a nice cold iced tea or something refreshing beverage, and that's it. And then see how that works. And just don't do more than that. Just do a little of that. Don't push yourself. And then maybe the next thing is, okay, I'm going to listen to a little something, whatever makes you move. Maybe week 2, you just add a little music to your little movement. And it might be, I'm just going to sit in the chair and wiggle, right? I'm not going to do anything else because I can't. It's too much or my hip hurts. But I find being gentle, kind, and caring. And for me, what's worked over time is just baby steps, glimmers and whispers. And then my body's like, oh, okay, I don't have to do this perfect. And if I don't do it an hour, then it does. Because we build up all these things. Maybe after listening or watching this, make a list of like 5 things that bring you joy that include maybe a little movement, right? And you could sit there and sing. I love to sing. Not many people like hearing me sing, but I do enjoy it. Maybe sing, and you could listen to a little music, and you could stand up for a second and put things around your writing area that might be a little treat. When I do this, like the pleasure bundles, I get that, whatever that is. Maybe a bowl of like really delicious fresh fruit or whatever. So you're feeding your mind that, boy, you just did something well, or you get to dance a little. I think you got to really work your own circuitry up here in your mind. You got to find out like what in the past has motivated you to do something you really didn't want to do or didn't think you had the time to do. And then what flipped it for you. And if this is your first time trying it, make it a delicious, luxurious list of, well, okay, I'll stand up. Yeah, you got that right. If I get one of these, I'm down. So it's just, you got to play with your own sense of lightness and create that little piece of movement that will work best for you and your body and your mind. Because we all know the more we move, the more the juices go, the more creativity. We need to get the blood flow to the brain and all those things. But you don't have to run a marathon, I'm here to tell you, or be an Ironman or pre-Olympic, whatever. I would say you do you, and you find out that little care package that like really brings some joy to your heart, but also nourishes the rest of your body in terms of movement.
I like the idea of the music because I think a lot of writers do write to music, maybe to inspire themselves. Maybe they are listening to different types of music depending on even the scene they're writing. Some might be more like suspenseful or fun and lighthearted or humorous or horrific or whatever, just something to set the mood. But I wonder how many of them are actually getting up and moving around to that music, which I think is not only a cool idea from the point of view of self-care, but also might be interesting from a writing point of view, because if you're listening to kind of ominous music and you get up and you start moving around in a way that seems appropriate for the ominous music, it might give you some hints as to how you want your characters to be moving around too.
Right. I do write some music too. I don't get up and move sometimes, although I'm sure my last third book was in Cuba. So I had this really great Cuban music that I really liked listening to. Right. And I even downloaded some of the songs on my favorite song playlist. But yeah, I think that's a great suggestion too. If your characters are going to be like, now I'm in Chicago, my characters are from Italy. So I'm listening to some Italian music. I try not to have words in it because the words distract me when I'm writing, but you're right. It just kind of gets the mood going.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea to pair it with music.
Yeah. Well, I would like to ask the listeners as their assignment for following up on this to let us know in the comments on the YouTube video of our interview what music they're listening to as they're writing, and are they getting up and moving to it? And is it helping them in the way that we're talking about, both from a health point of view and a writing point of view? And I'm glad you brought up the Mike Kuzala interview. That was back in episode 129, Moving for Creativity with Mike Kuzala, which would be a great companion piece to this discussion. And I like what both of you are saying. Mike is a much more active person than I am, but I think that what he said that I really appreciated is you don't have to be running the marathon. You don't have to be doing the weightlifting or the many things that he does. You don't have to be doing that as long as you're getting up and moving around in the way that's comfortable for you, which I think is also what you're saying as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Amy, thank you so much for sharing all that. And I know in the show notes, you had sent me some videos that I can link to if people want some other suggestions. Any other places you would like to send them to find out more about you and what you do online?
Well, two things. Yeah, my website is amyspele.com, but there's a button on it called Wellness Advocate. And if you just go to that, press it, there's like the hand yoga, the stretching in the chair, and some twisting and some spinal flexion. But I also like to I do these classes called LSB, not LSD, laughter, stretch, and breath. And I don't call it yoga because a lot of people are intimidated by the word yoga, but stretching and that. So there's a fun little, and laughter is really good too because it increases your endorphins, which increases your energy. So I had a fun clip on my Instagram where Lily Tomlin from Grace Frankie, who I love the show, she starts doing laughter yoga in one of the scenes. And so I took the clip and I put it, but just laughing, remembering your brain knows if something's funny, but your body doesn't. So if you and I just started laughing like silly hearts right now, our body's like, okay, I'll go for it. I don't really care if there's no one in here to say, what's that lady doing? But laughter also gets juices going. So if nothing else, giving yourself a chuckle, even if you're remembering something funny, but your brain, you can say, look, go on a little bit of a break here. I'm just going to laugh because I can. And if in a group with educators and people, superintendents, and I work in a retirement home, and we're just doing silly laughter. And it's maybe a minute, but at the end, one of the ladies goes, forgot how much fun this was for no reason. So it's another way. We want to get us things moving around, however that works for you, with either stretching or breathing, even if you're not getting up, just taking a really, really big, deep breath and pushing your diaphragm down, which opens up the lungs, the lower lungs, because we typically only breathe from the top 1/3 to 2/3 of our lungs. When you take a deep breath and just push the diaphragm down, you just allowed your lungs to go expand and lower, especially today and what's happening in the world with respiratory infections and all that kind of thing. I think it's just a good thing to just take a deep breath. Wow. And then fill your lungs and just let a sigh out. And even just doing that, and you can do that while you're driving. You can do it while you're writing. You can do it when you're sitting in a chair at the commercial break. But just giving yourself a little extra oxygen, moving in your system by taking deep breaths or even laughing a little bit. No one's hurt. No one's offended. And you've got a little bit of joy and a little energy in your body moving up and down. So those are just like little simple things to do.
Perfect. Well, Amy, thank you so much for those important reminders. And I'll be curious to hear what people tell us about if they're using music to act on some of the things you're recommending.
Well, I hope a little bit helps. I just hope people move and do what works for them. no judgment, and know that just what they do is just going to be just fine. Turn off the old judgment button, show up the way that fits for you, and forget laughing out loud or enjoying a song or doing your stretching in your hand, which is so important. You're giving your body a gift. And I feel like that's really important.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maddie.